Hi folks, how are you doing? I'm the Reverend Danny Crosby, Unitarian minister serving congregations in Altrincham and in Urmston in the northwest of England. And I'm offering this devotion as a balm for the heart, for the mind, for the spirit, and for the soul. And the title for today's reflection is Odyssey Returning from a Fog. So let's begin by just stilling ourselves, preparing ourselves. Let's invite a loving presence to be amongst us and to awaken from deep, deep within us all. So we come together despite being physically apart, united in devotion to life and to love. Let's sing the joy of living in all of life's mystery, and it's certainly a mystery. Look to this day, for it is life, the very life of life. In its brief course lie all the verities and realities of your existence, the bliss of growth, the glory of action, the splendor of beauty. For yesterday is but a dream, and tomorrow is only a vision. But today well lived makes every yesterday a dream of happiness, and every tomorrow a vision of hope. Look well, therefore, to this day. I drove home last Monday to visit family. As I passed through the moors on the top of the Pennines on the M62, that highest point of the motorway in England, as I drove through, coming home, I entered into a dense fog. It continued virtually all the way home, actually, back to Yorkshire, and only dissipated as I pulled into the drive. And it was the same as I drove back to Altrincham that night, although it cleared as I joined the Manchester Ring Road. Now, it wasn't an unfamiliar feeling, as I felt I've been living in a bit of a fog these last few months. Haven't we all really for quite some time? It's felt not quite the same, normal, how life usually is. But I noticed my personal fog, if you like, the fog I felt in my personal life, in myself to some degree, that seemed to lift on Christmas morning as I awoke, actually. And for that, I'm so very grateful. Life is often described as a journey, although the truth be told, it's a road to nowhere. We don't really go anywhere, do we? Unless you're one of these ultra rich people who can blast off into space. But for most of us, we go around in circles. And we always end up returning to the same place many, many, many times. But although we return to the same place, aren't we often changed in all kinds of strange and wonderful ways? Sometimes when we return home, we bring back treasure and treasure to share. The lovely thing about returning home, of course, is that the return comes with a sense of belonging to a place where you finally feel that you belong. Maybe that's the treasure. Maybe that's what happens on the final journey. Who knows? I don't. I've been thinking and felt quite deeply, touched quite deeply really, all the many, many folk I've known in my life over this Christmas season, folk I've journeyed with during my life, but folk who are no longer with us. People who've shared their treasures with myself and with other people. And my heart's been singing a song of praise to these people these last week or so, really. It's rather lovely. Just remembering, refeeling, being truly grateful for the gifts that they shared. I hope I can be an example like that when my time comes. Well, here's a little gift someone shared with me a few years ago. It's a little short poem by Tom Leonard entitled Odysseus. It took me so long to get back to who I am. Why was I away so long? Why was the journey so tortuous? All those false masks against a backdrop narrative to do with authenticity. But now arriving back there is still much debris to clear, the clearer to see the point from which I started, that from which I set out, confused in sundry identities at war with themselves. Now to find calm at that setting up point as the final destination. That final destination, I'm not sure. Not sure what that is yet. But as I was coming back to my home in Altrincham, just driving through that fog, I found myself singing one of the chants I've shared in singing meditation. Something I've not done for too long, really. The words were, the earth, the air, the fire, the water, return, return, return. The earth, the air, the fire, the water, return, 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 return. The earth, the air, the fire, the water, return, 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 return. And it's those final words that were singing in my heart. Return, return, return. They were just almost taking over my whole being. You got me thinking about a conversation I recently heard on Odysseus and the Odyssey, really. I think a friend had recently seen the classic movie about it. Now, while we might not be fighting mythical beasts in our lives, we are all on some kind of adventure, a kind of odyssey, if you like, that throughout our lives we step out, we get lost, we find ourselves in the dark of winter, lost in a fog. But that eventually we return home, or at least we yearn to return home, often enlightened by the adventure, with treasure to share. The call for home is a very powerful one. You may resist it, but the call is still powerful. Human history is littered with stories and adventures inspired by the search for treasure, for wisdom, for enlightenment. Think of the great figures of religion, Jesus, the Buddha, Muhammad, Gandhi. They all stepped out into the wild alone, and they all returned enlightened. Think also of the heroic figures from the great stories. They did similar, really. They were called out into the unknown, only to return with something new and inspiring. They stepped into the dark, but came home in the light. Stories such as Jason and the Argonauts, or many of the other Greek tales, Pilgrim's Progress, Gulliver's Travels, The Wizard of Oz, Jack and the Beanstalk, The Lord of the Rings. The list is endless. Human history is littered with folk tales and myths which teach us so much about what life is in all its potential, both for beauty and, of course, for horror. The great mythologist Joseph Campbell, who spent years exploring such myths, believed that these stories helped us to fully understand how each of us at some point in our lives, or at many moments of our lives, are called out to journey forth. He identified 4 distinct stages of this journey. The first stage Campbell named the call to adventure. This, he claimed, is caused by discontent, which draws us out of the comfort of our lives to risk something new. The second stage is a form of initiation, where the hero goes through a series of ordeals that test their mental and their physical skills. The third stage is the time of revelation, the discovery of truth and treasure. The final stage is the return to one's community, with wisdom gained and with treasure to share. Coming home in the light, if you like, coming out of the dark, driving through that fog to clarity once more. Happens all the time. The adventures began and they ended with a call. They began with a powerful call to adventure, but they also ended with an equally powerful call to return home. Just think of Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz and those immortal words as she clicked her ruby slippers. There's no place like home. There's no place like home. There's no place like home. Do you think they're similar to those words that I was singing in my heart when I was driving through the fog? Return, return, return. The call to return, especially to return home, is a powerful call. This call, though, is not just about returning to a place. It's also about returning to a time, I believe, about returning to a time in life when everything was simpler and safer. I'm sure that's what Dorothy's calling the Wizard of Oz was. She wanted to get back to Kansas. And that return to that simpler, safer time is what we call nostalgia, of course. To return to a place of safety, perhaps a place of paradise, where we were cared for and looked after. But nostalgia is often blind and not always true, really. It can be very painful at times. Things are never quite as we remember them. My granddad always says no such thing as the good old days. They were not what we think they were. Nostalgia is one of those words that doesn't really mean what it originally meant. It used to mean severe homesickness considered as a disease. Home woe, really, homesickness. Rooted in the Greek word algos, meaning pain, grief, distress, and nostos, meaning homecoming. So nostalgia is a painful homecoming. And the physical return home can also be painful, especially if what we are returning with is seemingly not wanted. Sometimes you might be rejected the first time you return home. Think of Jack and his beans in the story, Jack and the Beanstalk. Think of the account in Mark's Gospel of Jesus returning home and being rejected and almost mocked. As he said to his disciples, prophets are not without honour, except in their hometown and among their own kin and in their own house. It can be very painful returning home. I know that feeling many times. Sometimes we might not be recognised when we return home. How painful can that feel? We can feel like a stranger in our own land. Think of Odysseus, who is recognised by no one on his return. It's only as he begins to speak that his old, now blind dog recognises his voice, and the dog's tail begins to thud with joy and love and recognition. Finally, someone recognises him. He's accepted. I remember a painful experience of my own many, many years ago. There have been some quite sudden and dramatic changes in my life. Never been quite the same person since, if I'm honest. And I remember over the months that followed that I would go home for a few days and I would always return back here frustrated, with this feeling that my family, my loved ones were not accepting me as I was. I remember going to see my old minister at the time, John Midgley, and voicing this, and I remember him calmly saying to me, after he'd listened to me going on for God knows how long, Danny, you have gone through some dramatic changes, and while you have adjusted to this, it will take others some time. People are not quite sure how to be with you. They are used to you being a certain way, and it will take them some time to adjust to the new you. I remember thinking to myself how wise these words were, and I also reflected some time later that perhaps I'd not changed that much. It was still all about me, really, wanting to be accepted as I was, instead of me wanting to adjust and wanting them to adjust, really, to understand me. Maybe what I should have been doing is trying to understand and accept them, and that's something that takes work with people. These days, though, I rarely feel unaccepted wherever I go, and I feel that I'm gratefully received even when I go home. If I come to preach in my own town, I'm recognised and accepted too, if you like. I am welcome. Although recently I've not quite felt that actually. I felt a little out of place. I felt myself back in some kind of fog. I felt unaccepted and unwelcome. Not that anybody else has made me feel that way. I've felt myself unaccepted and unwelcome by myself, actually. But I've kept going, and I've come to a place of self-acceptance once again, and the fog has cleared, thank God. The truth is, I've always been loved and accepted as I am. I just haven't always loved and accepted myself. And that's a journey, a constant journey, that's always changing. The journey home this week has once again shown to me there's no place like home. There's no place like home. There's no place like home. And home is wherever you lay your hat, of course, as Paul Young once sang. It's been wonderful to share stories and laughter once again and remember some rather beautiful experiences of being with folk who are long gone now, remembering those people that loved us really. Long gone. People I've not thought about in years that have come into my heart and mind. Remembering the warmth and love, just being in their company, in their home. I remember it as a little lad, being in a great auntie's house, someone I've not thought about for years, and we were talking, and I just felt this lovely feeling of being in their presence, really, of being welcomed in their home, of feeling at home with them, feeling safe and protected, wanted, needed, and loved up. We all need that. Because recently I've not been remembering those feelings. I've felt less than lovely feelings, but I've come out of that fog, and thank God for that. Just goes to show me once again that we remember our past through the lens of our current experience. Some say you can't change the past, and it's true that you can't change the facts of the past, but the way you remember the past is under constant change. I love the poem Art of Poetry by Jorge Borges. Like Campbell, Borges recognises a common theme in the great stories. In this poem, he explores some of the great ancient Greek stories, one being Ulysses, which is the Latin translation of Odysseus, and his painful return to Ithaca. He also talks of the philosopher Heraclitus, who suggested that we can never return to the same river. This is because the water will continually flows on, and the water we step into is never quite the same as the water we stepped into before. But also because we who stand in the river are not quite the same person either. Life will have changed us too. Like the river, our lives go on, ever changing. The lesson is that it's not about yearning to return to some mythical ideal, but to fully experience the adventure, the beautiful journey, as the poem by Campbell said, Ithaca. It's the journey that's the gift, really. And maybe that's the lesson of all the great stories. Homer's Odyssey, perhaps other great stories. The treasure itself is not really something you find. The actual treasure is the journey you're given. That's the real gift of life. The greatest gift of all, the ultimate grace, the ultimate free gift is life itself. We did nothing to deserve it, did we? We're lucky to be here, really, in this time and place, although we don't always recognise this. Life is a journey, and a beautiful one at that, one in which we are constantly turning and returning again and again and again. It's not always an easy one, and one where there will be troubles and there will be difficulties. There will be times when we will not be recognised and may not even recognise ourselves. There will be times when we feel completely lost and won't know where to turn for sanctuary. There will be times of darkness too, when we find ourselves lost in a fog. But we all must journey on. And in the end, of course, we return from where we came. We return from the beautiful Odyssey. We step out of the fog, out of the darkness for the final time, and we return to the light. We come home. Come home. We come home. I'm going to end with some words of blessing. You know, we all need to bless more. We can all bless. We do so by giving our whole hearts to life. So let's begin today. Let's give our whole hearts to life. May the Eternal bless you and protect you. May the Eternal smile on you and favour you. May the Eternal befriend and prosper you. And may we all sing the song of the eternal. And may we carry that song with us in all that we feel, in all that we think, in all that we say, in all that we do. Go in love and peace. Journey on. Amen.